Hey everyone, and welcome to Building Loved Businesses, the show where we spotlight remarkable companies that are beloved in their communities but largely unknown outside of them. I'm your host, Nathan Schock, and today's guest is someone whose business has been a fixture in his community for over 130 years. Necker's Jewelers, founded in 1893, has, are you ready for this? 3 owners in all that time. Dave Necker is the third, and under his leadership, the business has gone from struggling to standout. And we're going to talk about what it takes to carry forward that kind of legacy, and more importantly, what it takes to grow it. So, Dave, let's start with your family's story about how you got into this. Your parents, they bought into the business in the 50s, right? And I
Yeah,
think you said the money was literally buried in jars? Tell me about
yeah,
that.
yeah. No, it was after World War II. My father, on a GI Bill, went to watchmaking school, and he worked for a couple jewelers in Dubuque, Iowa, and then he worked for a jeweler in Maquoketa, Iowa, and after a few years, a jewelry store came up for sale in a little town called DeWitt, Iowa. It's a town of I think it was 4,000 back then. It's really grown. It's exploded. I think it's 5,000 now. And so it's a small farm community, and but he got in there, and the gentleman was, I don't even know how old he would have been. Probably could figure it out, but he'd probably been working at it for 60, 70 years. And so there was another jeweler looking at it, and my dad convinced him he was the one that needed to buy it, and the guy agreed. And so but my dad went to the bank, couldn't get any money, so he went to the relatives and friends and family and knocked on a lot of doors until he raised the money he needed to raise. And it's just kind of crazy. We get my mother tells a story how the banker was just sitting there counting out the money, and he just got further and further away from the money because the money was moldy. I go, why was it moldy? She goes, well, because it was all buried in jars. So my grandparents and my parents all went through the Great Depression, of course, and so this. I said, so how many spots did you bury? And she goes, 3 or 4. But my mother's favorite was the under the chicken coop. So they would scrape away the chicken poop and start digging.
Nobody would look there.
No, I don't think so either. So that was the deal. So it was they got the store bought, and it had a 2 bedroom apartment above, and their whole goal was to pay off debt, and before they went into a house. And eventually they had 5 kids in that 2 bedroom apartment. And I slept in a crib till I was 4 or 5 years old. Of course, didn't know any different, other than it's probably why my head's shaped the way it is because kind of outgrew that crib. But then my uh, younger brother came along, and mom said, that's enough. We need a house. And so I guess the baby was in mom and dad's room, and I think that probably put a dent in their love life. So it's time to get a house now. So
Yeah.
so they went out and got a house, and we moved there. We were just astounded by a yard, just unbelievable how cool that was. I remember the feeling like yesterday, walking to seeing that big yard. I'm like, wow, didn't even know things like that existed. So and yeah, I kind of grew up in the business. My dad eventually grew into 3 Hallmark stores, and my mother ran those and operated the Hallmark stores. And so I kind of grew up with the family dinner talking about business my
Hmm.
whole life. And then I was went to college for 3 years and thought I needed to take a break. And then I was out in California working on the oil rigs, and my dad gave me a call and said, "Do you have any interest in this business?" And I said, "Well, how are you doing?" He goes, "Not, I'm doing terrible." I said, "Wow, this offer sounded better all the time." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, it was the middle of the farm crisis, and I didn't feel it out in California, but the town was a ghost town. There was about 3 businesses left. He owned 2 out of the 3. the Hallmark card store and the jewelry store. So I said, do you have a plan? And he said, yeah, I've got a plan. I'm going to hire this company to do this big liquidation sale. And so they did, and it was eye-opening. This company came in, and I think our budget was around $5,000 a year at the time for advertising, and they were going to spend $50,000 in the early
Wow.
80s. And they told us that we would do about a year's worth of volume in 8 weeks.
And did you?
Well, we did, and probably more. And it's hard to believe, but when you're desperate, some of those are your easiest decisions you can make when you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And
But it also sounds like in the process of doing that, that liquidation sale, you came away with some pretty solid learnings. What did you take away from that?
That was, advertising is how powerful it was and how well it works. And so I broke it down, studied it, understood it to a certain level, read books, self-taught a lot. A lot of it was trial and error. And I was fortunate enough to work with a dad that would question me, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And he goes, well, that isn't going to work. And I said, why not? And he goes, because I already tried it. And I said, what happens if I change this, this, and this? And he said, well, it's still not going to work. And he said, but go ahead. And let me do it. And, of course, he was right. And it didn't work. But and I remember I remember him go, how much are you spending on this one event? I said, 10 grand. 10 grand? Are you kidding me? We would have to do $100,000 in those 3 days. He said, we'll never come close. And he said, we'd be lucky to do 20,000. I said, yeah, don't measure me on the individual event. Why don't you measure me at the end of the year and see how if I stay within that 10%. And I know 10% is very aggressive when it comes to marketing dollars, but we are believers in it. And we knew that we had to rise above the noise that's in the marketplace and to make an effect, and we did, and we grew that business tremendously from that day on. And I was working with my dad, and he was diagnosed with cancer, prostate cancer, and then my brother, who was working down in Kansas City, I said, why don't you come out and work with us, and we'll see how this goes. At least you'll be home closer to dad if something goes south, and it did go south. I got to work with him about 5 or 6 years before he passed away. And then my brother came in as a partner, and we made a pitch to Mom to sell us the business. And once she sold us the business, we leveraged the inventory to buy to get another note from the bank and then start another jewelry store.
Great. Let me come back here, Dave. I want to just camp out on your lessons on advertising. So you learned, right, where the business went away from that mindset of there has to be an immediate return on advertising to really a focus on, no, if we do this consistently, it's going to pay off over the long term. And now that's become a really important part of your strategy. So just tell me, how did you fully get to that evolution to where this did become, we're gonna advertise way above the average, and we're gonna do it consistently?
It was you look at it, and I think the average at the time was 3 to 4% in advertising spend. And to jump to 10, I convinced Dad that our rent wasn't very much, and rent is part of your exposure. And since we owned the building, that we could afford to spend more on outside advertising, and he bought into that. And I just felt like it was common sense, and instinctively I just said, well, I was probably trying to dig out of a hole that I didn't realize I was in, and I came up with that excuse, and he bought it. But it seems to work that way, and it's still that way today, because most people, when they advertise and promote, they advertise and they go all in for 2 or 3 months. Well, 2 or 3 months doesn't move the needle. Yeah. And it's a much longer term commitment, and you have to you got to stick with it. And so whenever I would help friends or anything with advertising promoting, I said this is a 12-month commitment. This is not a 6-month deal. We got to jump in and we got to stay consistent and work it for at least 12 months. Yeah. And so then you can measure me at the end of 12 months, just like I did with my dad. So
and that 10%, while you've kind of stayed with that number, overall it's gotten to be a much bigger number. How big was the business when you took it over, and what have you been able to grow it to?
Well, when I started at the business, it was doing about $225,000 a year. It was down quite a bit during the farm crisis, and I think we're going to be close to 16 million this year in sales, and so it's grown. And I would like to say that I'm really good at what I do, but I think the truth is you just have to be consistent and stay with it and put a plan together and work the plan. And that'll do it. And the other thing helps is that your competition gets old and they die. So, and nobody's really replaced them. I think they used to say one jewelry store per 5,000 population, but I bet that number is close to one jeweler per 100,000 today.
Wow.
And and the industry's changed quite a bit. This industry was controlled 80% by independent jewelers, and now I think that number is probably in the 35%. So like a lot of small businesses in the world, larger businesses have come in and taken over with better systems, better controls, and better operational skills, because I think the biggest problem independent business owners have is they're not good at everything. So you wear a lot of different hats, and you're just not good at all of them. And I was fortunate enough to have a brother that was good on the finance side of things and understood numbers, and I just never, I obviously I can read a P&L and I can go through it and do some forecasting, things like that today, but it's just not the area where I want to be. And so I kind of took the side of more the vision marketing side, and he took more the finance and operations side of things. And I think that's a huge reason why we're successful, is because there was two of us.
Yeah.
And we had the trust in the process. So understanding your weaknesses and augmenting them with somebody else's strength is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you're a $225,000 a year business, you are doing everything, right? It's like you're wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
And, but if you continue to wear all those hats, you're going to cap your growth. And so how did you, just talk me through that process of really, dividing up the top level responsibilities with your brother, but then also bringing in other people that would complement even what you guys maybe weren't the best at or didn't want to spend your time doing?
As you go through business, you pick up things from either consultants or books you read, seminars you go to, and training and trusting is something that I grew up with my dad. He allowed me to make my own mistakes, and so I was never tied to a lot of discipline in this company. If people are afraid to try, they're not going to. So giving them the support and the safety net at the same time with incentives, I feel works a lot better than by using the stick method. And it's just never been my thing. And so people are, we're all humans, and unless you walk on water, you're going to make some mistakes. So, and you just gotta roll with it.
Yeah.
So,
what you're starting to describe there, Dave, is culture, right? The culture is, we want to be a culture that empowers our people, not that puts them in a tight box and wants to keep them there, right? And so how have you intentionally built the culture at Neckers, and what do you see it as? How do you guys think about culture?
You know, even working on the oil rigs, we had my driller was he wanted to work hard, but we also played hard, and I I still work on that philosophy, but we also have to have fun. Even on the oil rig, we had a blast. We had a lot of fun while we're working there, and as long as the pusher wasn't around, uh, we would have our fun. We would get our jobs done, and we would do it extremely well. Um, and but when we had downtime, we had fun. And so in our company, if I can't have fun, I'm not coming to work. And I believe most people are the same way. If you don't enjoy what you do, your turnover is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
And we've got at least 3 or 4 employees that are in the 30-year range, um, a lot in the 20-year range, a lot in the 15-year range. So we don't, even though I'm not afraid of turnover, because sometimes they get entitled and when they've worked for you too long. But but I still want to have an area where uh, people have a smile on the face, and we call it giving the ride in the park. You want to give the customer the best ride in the park, and what does that look like? Well, fun has to be part of it,
Yeah.
and making an event or an occasion seem different than where they're going to get anywhere else is important. So, and everybody thinks they're the best at customer service, or they're the best at diamond buyer, they're the best at merchandiser, and but you can be all that, but if it's not a great experience, they're not coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about that, right? Because you talked about this shift from independent to national. And across most of the industries that we talk to and work with, we see that one of the big ways that the small local independent can continue to really show up, the big ones, is through that customer experience, right? It's the proximity to the customer that gives them a real competitive advantage. So how does Neckers think about that, and how do you use a customer experience to your advantage?
I think it's huge. It's we adopt a policy of it, like inviting somebody into your home. I mean, do you say, "What are you doing here today?" or "What can I help you with?" or "What can I show you?" No, it's, "Hey, welcome to Neckers. Can I get you a cocktail? Can I get you a bottle of water, pop water? We got all kinds of flavors of coffee. Can we start you off with that? Can I take your jacket? Can I hang it up for you?" And it's like, and then it's never a business conversation. It's always a personal conversation. We always have time for business, but getting to know the customer is really the important part of the process. And I gotta be honest, I don't really care if I sell anything. I care more about getting to know these people, and I love stories, and I love their story, and I just find that fascinating. And the other thing is, I don't look for people that just like people. I think there's a difference between people that like people and people that want to serve people. And I think it's a much different way. I'll go all out. I watched my dad do it. Somebody would walk into our store and ask for something. If he didn't have it, he'd get on the phone. Of course, well before the internet, he'd get on the phone and call these businesses around town. "Do you have this?" And he'd say, "Yeah, I found it. Go to this place," and he'd draw him a map. And he would actually take people and put them in his car and drive them around the town.
Drive them
And
to a competitor,
not a
essentially.
competitor, but but he was always selling the town too.
Oh,
And he
yeah.
would take them
Okay.
out and show them parts of the little town that we had, and he was always selling the town and selling and it was all, and I know it was all about the experience.
Yeah.
And he would take the mother's babies out of their hands, and he would hold the babies for them so they didn't
Yeah.
have to. And I remember the one day he'd take the baby down to the card store to show the girls down at the card store. That was 4 doors down. Well, all of a sudden he goes out the front door with the baby, and the mother's like, "Did he just take my baby outside?" I go, "Oh yeah." He loves babies, and he's going down to show the girls at the other store the baby. He'll be back shortly. And I was like, "Dad, you can't take people's babies outside the store. They don't even know you." And so we laugh about stuff like that. But no, that was the thing, and I think it's so important to understand the customer's needs more than their wants. So if a customer comes in for something and they go, "I want this, this, and this," but if it doesn't really match their needs, and I understand their needs better because this is all I do every day. I say, "You know what you really need is this." "Oh, well, I never thought about that. Why do you say that?" And then I would give the reasons to that. But if you really understand your business and understand your customers, you should have a better handle on what they need more than what they want.
Yeah.
So,
What you were describing there a minute ago, Dave, is what we call service aptitude. Right? It's that willingness to do whatever it takes to serve the customer. And is that something that you look for in the hiring process, or do you try to train it afterwards? How do you think about that, what you just talked about as being such an important quality to your business?
one of my hire I did a couple years ago, I was in Lowe's, and I was looking for I said, "You guys cut this to length?" I was just looking for time saving. I mean, I got my own saws and stuff, but and the guy says, "No, we don't do that because liabilities anymore. We don't cut. We're not cutting things." And he said, "Boy, if you lived in DeWitt, I would cut it at my house. You can come over to my house." I said, "Well, I do live in DeWitt." He goes, "You do? Where?" And I told him, "So here's my address. Come over to my house. I'll cut it for you." And so a guy from Lowe's. So I go, "What else do you do?" He goes, "Well, I'm retired from Purina, and I'm just doing this as to get me out of the house." And I said, "Did you ever think about selling diamonds or getting the jewelry business?" Like, selling diamonds? This guy in a kind of a macho guy, and he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, that is not something I ever consider selling." And I said, "Well," and I told him, "Well, it's a happy business, and people come in, and you get to be a part of their celebrations, and blah 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 blah." So anyway, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna guess it's in about 2 or 3 weeks, your boss is gonna piss you off, and you're gonna call me." He goes, "No way." Well, he did. 2 or 3 weeks later, he called me. He says, "Yeah, my boss just pissed me off." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "When do you want to start?" And he goes, "Whenever." So, if you're in the marketplace, and I like bartenders, I like waitresses, I like those that are in the service
Yeah.
industry,
Oh,
and I think you can. What do they say? You can teach a monkey how to fly a rocket, but you can't teach them how to like people or
yeah.
serve people.
Right.
So, and so I don't. Um, I look at that and say, well, you gotta experience it first, and then you recruit from there.
Yeah. I totally agree and love that example because we find the best service people in other service roles, right? The ones that are
Right.
excelling in those service roles. And I see some of the best leaders are always recruiting, right? They're
Hmm.
always got that antenna out. And those roles are such great training too. My very first W-2 job was waiting tables at the Baxter Cafe in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, right?
Uh-huh.
And I had to learn how to please everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody that walked up to that table, I had to learn how to take care of. Why? Because I got instant feedback in the form of tips.
Yeah.
And so you learn really quickly. So great example.
Yeah. No, I just that's the key. I think to business is, and I didn't really understand. They always said hire somebody that likes people, and over the years, I just said it's much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that distinction. Well, Dave, it hasn't all been since you took over and did that liquidation sale. It hasn't all been an easy straight line up and to the right. Right? You've had your challenges, and I want you to share the story about that time where you said your financials looked great, but weren't accurate, and the banker said, "Hey, we got a problem here," and somehow you pitched them a new idea and got them to give you 10 times more than what you needed. So just walk me through that story.
It's I know I don't know everything, and but that doesn't keep me from trying. And so part of the thing is you go, if you knew what you knew, would you even try? Well, not necessarily, and so you don't. You just have to have faith in the fact that you can figure it out. And I know my brother was working the floor. I was working the floor. We're a smaller company, and we had 2 or maybe 3 locations at the time. Excuse me. And he and we had an in-house accountant, and our financials looked all pretty good. But the banker looked at it and wanted a cash flow statement, and then we gave him that, and he goes, "Yeah, something's not right with this process." And so she was taking memo merchandise and putting it as owned, and so our valuation looked good because we owned it, but we didn't really own this merchandise. And he said, "You guys are hemorrhaging and you don't even know it." And I think that was around 2000. And I needed 50 grand, and he goes, "No, I'm not going to give you the 50 grand." I said, "Why not?" He goes, "Not because you guys don't even know what you're doing with your business." And so I recognized that our models were in the malls were dead. We need to get out of the malls. And I said, "Okay, how about not give me 50 grand? How about give me $500,000 to build this new store? I'm going to close these 2 stores, open this one big store, and this is going to be 3 times the size of any other jewelry store in the town. It's going to market itself different. It's going to present itself different, and blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Okay, I'll give you $500,000 for that idea instead of 50 grand for the other." And and that was a hard look at our business. And it's Groundhog Day. You jump in and it's kind of the same thing every day, and you're not taking the time to step back and look and work on your business while you're working in your business. And so you got to be able to step back and take a look at it. And of course we weren't, and the banker was, and he was actually a great consultant for us and helped us in seeing what was wrong with the business, and it was very helpful. Again, there's a banker that wanted to understand our business instead of just saying no. He wanted to know where the problem was at so he could help us. That was great customer service. Still with that bank.
Yeah.
So,
How long had you probably known you needed to close those mall stores?
I don't know. That's a good question. We weren't growing like we needed to grow. The sales weren't there. We're right there with all the national brands and chains, and of course they did they did better training than what we did. They did better merchandise than what we did. They had the price points covered better than what we did. They couldn't buy better than we were. In fact, they probably paid a little bit more because they needed consistency. And since Mother Nature produces this product, it's hard to create a lot of consistency. So they have to pay more for that consistency. But they were still kicking our ass, and I was just like, we just need to make a change because we're battling with them on their own turf, and we got to change the way we're doing it. And so, in customer service, of course, better, more space, more open, more private buying processes. Throwing in a bar, making the experience completely different was a big deal. So, and then again, marketing. Now it's so diluted, and where to advertise and how to advertise, that's gotten really complicated. And traditional media is not near as effective as it used to be. And so you always heard that saying, location, location, location. Well, you could have a bad location and you can market to it, like we did that little town. We brought everybody to us. Well, now location, location is coming back into an important process because your exposure and we put a pretty unique storefront on this one. We just expanded again from 4,000 to 8,000 square feet and put a pretty unique storefront on the front because that's your marketing. A day in, a day out. It's just your cheapest form of advertising is the way your building looks like and does it capture eyeballs. And so that's it's been very effective, and our sales are, I don't know, up 30%. So yeah, it's adding millions a year to sales with the new build out.
And what gave you the confidence to make that bet in that moment, Dave?
Everybody said, at your age, why are you reinvesting? That's what I heard a lot. Why are you spending millions on building out a new jewelry store? And I'm like, I don't know. It's all I know. And it's what I know, and I know that this is what it needs. And my brother was like, yeah, well, let's set a budget. And so we set a budget and added 30% to the budget, and we're still 30% over that budget. So it didn't come in anywhere near where we wanted, but you don't build buildings every day, and you don't really understand the costs in that world that well. Now, if I had to go out and build a new one right now in a different market, I'd be much better at it. And so,
and the cost would be much higher.
No, I think my costs would come down because I would. I think I have a better handle on what we need and what we don't need.
There you go. Yeah.
What makes the impact and what doesn't, and the cases I use and the lighting I use, and yeah, I think I would do things just a little bit differently, and I think I could shave $1 million off that budget.
All right. Well, we'll be looking for your next. We'll be looking for your next building.
I think I'm done. I think this is my last hurrah. I've got I'm just in the process of family succession and trying to. I've got my middle child. She's in her 20s and she's in the business now and took over all our marketing and doing a phenomenal job. And working with her dad and her uncle is not always that easy, and she's managing it very well. And so, I'd like to see the next generation stay in the business. So many of these businesses, nobody wants them. So many businesses, and there's a lot of opportunities out there for people, and it just, I don't know. There's so many good ideas. There's so many ways to make money in this world, but taking over an existing business that sales aren't quite what they should be. But I think jump starting an old business would be a lot easier than starting a brand new one. And I would find even if it was in plumbing or if it was in HVAC, if it was in whatever it was, I'd figure it out. And I bet I could manage it and do it in a way that would bring a lot of life to that business.
Well, Dave, I'm glad you went there, right? So you've got your brother in the business. Now you've got a daughter. There's a lot of family businesses out there. And like you said, there's a lot of businesses that are holding out hope that next generation will take over. So what advice would you give to someone running a family business as they think about carrying it on into the future?
That's a tough one. It's you don't want to shackle your kid into a business that you've done and you've enjoyed and you've wanted and selfishly want somebody else to take it over, because that may not be their passion. And if it's not their passion, I don't think it's going to be successful. So you want to make sure that it's the kid brings the idea to you. You want to leave an environment where they feel welcome. Hey, this is available if you ever want it. I'm not ever going to force you or encourage you. This is something you got to come to on your own grips. And of course, we have it in our policy that any kid that comes in the business has to work elsewhere for years before they come back into the business, so they can. It's like my dad told me, I can teach you everything I know, but I need you to come here to teach me something. And so I was forced to work at other places.
So
So.
you did the next adjacent industry, oil rigs, right? Yeah,
Well, yeah, I did that, and then I used to sell jewelry wholesale on the road as
there you
well,
go.
and in 5 different states, and then I did work for a jeweler through college for a few years, and he taught me more what not to do than what to do, and so those are all good experiences,
Yeah,
and so, but the hard knocks stuff was just having faith.
yeah,
And that if you can, anybody can figure it out, it's you, and then trying.
yeah.
And there's no real failures. Those are all learning opportunities, and you can always pick up something from those losses. And I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and I'm not afraid of it because you still learn.
Yeah. Well, entrepreneurs are nothing if not optimistic, because otherwise, why would they even try it? Well, Dave, you've now taken a 130-year-old business and made it one of the top independent jewelers in the country.
Hmm.
What keeps you excited about the business today and in the future?
Um, Everybody asks when I'm going to retire, and
That's just a nice way of saying mine was just a nice way of asking that question.
and I look at it, and I get excited about seeing my employees.
Hmm.
And I love walking in here and seeing them and joking with them and having a good time with them and
Hmm.
teasing them um, and I like the customer. I and my wife says it probably best. She builds her energy by shutting off the world and rebuilding her energy, and I rebuild my energy by being connected to the world.
Yeah.
And I have to find that connection with the people, and it's where I drive my energy from. And I I don't know. I like my dad said. I think I always want a place to hang my hat and be able to go to, and I don't need to sell anything. I just need to be the bartender. I've got a great bar in the store. It's pretty cool, and I I take these people on their own whiskey tour with inside the store, and we have a lot of fun with whiskeys, and um, and
What's your
uh,
favorite? What's your favorite whiskey?
well, I I have somebody that gives me, because they can't sell it, they give me the original Templeton Rye. And the Templeton Rye was Al Capone's, supposedly Al Capone's favorite whiskey. The family that made it for him makes it for me. And I get, um, it comes with duct tape on the bottle, and it's a recycled bottle of some type, vodka, tequila, whatever. And it's unbelievably
Mm,
smooth whiskey, and that's I like the story and I like the taste,
yeah,
and so of course then I give it away as well to anybody that wants to show up for it.
you
So
bet.
if you're in town, or if anybody's near the Quad Cities, you want to try some great whiskey, just poke your head in. You don't have to buy anything. Just come here and say I want to try the whiskey. So
That's what I was just gonna ask is how people find you. Where should they come to get a taste of that Templeton Rye?
well, DeWitt, Iowa is the original town that the store started in the 1893s, and the Davenport location is right off the interstate. Interstate 80 goes east and west across the country, and we're just about 5 minutes off that Interstate 80. So if you're traveling down Interstate 80, you can think about the home of the American Pickers, and that's here in LeClaire, Iowa, which is next door. And we're right there, so you can go visit the Pickers and come and sample some whiskey with me.
I think I just found my next family vacation.
Right? And everybody goes, well, yeah, you just serve that booze to get them drunk so they buy more. And I go, I got to be honest with you. If you're going to make me shop for clothing, jewelry, furniture, you better give me a cocktail because I don't want to be there. So it's not about selling more, it's about easing the pain.
We,
So while you're there.
well, we have now found your winning formula, Dave. Dave, this conversation was a blast. Thank you for being part of building loved businesses.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and it's always nice to take a minute, sit back, and reflect a little bit, and 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 I've never been much for resting on my laurels because I'm always afraid of somebody coming in town taking my ball away from me and running with it.
There you
So
go.
I'm always on top of things, but I would like to relax more as the future goes. So
Good.
I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you get that opportunity. Thanks again for being on the show. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, which I'm sure you did, leave a review and share it with someone you know who's building something great in their own corner of the world. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast in your favorite streaming platform. We'll see you next time.